Give you a little background about Brooke before we start. She's a design manager who has 8 years of experience spanning UX, UI, product design, fashion design, and product development. She's worked as a designer for Everymundo, done work for Nike, and been a freelance designer. And she's currently the UX design manager for Pros. She's passionate about building UX communities and enjoys mentoring designers throughout their UX journeys by providing them with tools and methods to increase their influences within their organizations. We're really happy to have her here. And so without any further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Brooke go ahead and take over.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you everyone for having me and for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to be talking about this. All right, just give me 2 seconds. All right, can everyone see my screen? I think we're still loading. Okay, here we are. Got it. Okay.
There we go.
Cool. So as Zach said, we're going to be talking about your guide to building a research excellence from the ground up tonight. So I'm just going to start here with in a cross-industry study, 630 US and UK executives by the consulting firm Accenture, 57% of the executives reported that the inability to meet customers' needs have resulted in failures of new products or services. So this is really important. This speaks to the business need for research and why we should be doing it. This is a great thing as you're thinking about building research into your program and into your organization to show to people that might be resistant about research. But as you can see, we need to understand what users really need from us before we start building products. So, all right, okay. So research is critical, but it can really get overlooked. Why is that? It can be a number of things. Sometimes you have short timelines. Perhaps you work in an agile environment like we do on my team, and you're not really budgeting a lot of time for research. But it's really, really important that you do. People might also have misconceptions about user research if you're at a company with low UX maturity. So really important that you explain the need for research and the importance of it throughout, and you just start to explain a little bit more about your methods and what you're doing. There might also be limited resources or budget constraints. So maybe you don't have an allocated UX researcher on your team. Maybe you don't have budget to pay your research participants or things like that. So we got to think of different ways that we can start to do that if we do not have a ton of resources. Maybe you're on a team of 1 designer. So we'll kind of talk about what that could look like. And then prioritizing customer requests. So a lot of companies just get so much feedback from users. They're getting this influx and they don't know what to do with it. They're really overwhelmed and they're just responding right away to that feedback instead of prioritizing what they've already launched in the market and really looking at things holistically. So it's really important that if you're doing research throughout, you'll be getting addressing a lot of those key usability issues from the beginning. So you won't have quite as many customer requests. And then another reason could just be low UX maturity. So maybe your organization hasn't done research in the past. Maybe they don't understand what a researcher does, why it's needed. So it's really kind of our role as UX practitioners or researchers to explain the value of it and why we need to do it. And yeah, so today, as Zach mentioned, I'm a career switcher. I used to be in fashion for a long time before UX. I was lucky that I joined Everymundo in my first role in my career. We were a really small team, and I really enjoyed that because I got to wear a lot of hats, learn a lot really quickly in my first role in UX. But with that came some lower UX maturity. We weren't doing a ton of research. The company didn't really understand it and didn't want to give resources to that. So I was pretty fortunate in that I joined Pros. Everymundo was acquired by Pros about 3 years ago. Pros has a really, really UX mature team. They do a ton of research, and research is really at the heart of everything that we do at Pros. But I think both of those experiences are super valuable, and it doesn't mean you need to be like me or my team where you need someone to come in and kind of tell you what to do. Today, I'm really going to just be telling you, you don't need permission. You can do research if you're not doing it today. We can start small and we can get there. So before I get into the processes and the methods and all of that, we are going to, probably having some issues, screen. So the benefits of a user research program, if you don't know, are increased user satisfaction and customer retention. So people love to talk about themselves, right? People love to give feedback, whether you want it or not. So this is a really, really great way to engage the customers. Customers love to feel like they're being heard. They love to see that Their ideas are actually being implemented into your product roadmaps. So this is a really great way to retain your customers and then reduce designing and development costs. A lot of agile environments or companies with lower UX maturity don't really understand that by not doing research, you actually can be wasting a lot of money because you need to now rework your designs. You need to go back later if you didn't test it from the beginning. And you could also risk launching a product into the market where there's no product market fit. No one actually wants that product. So maybe you design something super beautiful, but you don't actually know what users are trying to use it for. You don't understand their problems. You don't understand their workflows and stuff like that. So by incorporating research throughout the process, you can really reduce the design and development costs. And then the third point would just be improved decision-making informed by data. So what better way to know what to do than to actually hear it from users and get their feedback and then start to implement that. So not working off of assumptions, but actually getting that user feedback to drive your decision-making. So to this point, I would say don't rely on assumptions would be my main feedback here. A lot of times I noticed before we were doing research in my organization, a lot of the designers that came in really didn't have a good understanding of the problem space, what kind of problems they're solving, what their users are trying to do on a day-to-day. So it could really kind of lead to a suboptimal user experience. A lot of times, if you're not doing research, your team also doesn't feel confident in their decision-making and their designs because they're working based off of assumptions. So just because I think something looks beautiful doesn't mean it's actually going to work for the users. So really important to, get out and solve these actual problems and make sure you're not just making assumptions, working off of hypotheses. So now I'm going to tell a story about the Lego Group. Hopefully we're all familiar with the Lego Group, but if you didn't know, Lego Group is a really user research driven organization today, and it wasn't always that way. So in the 1980s and 1990s, Lego Group was rapidly expanding into theme parks, action figures, games, television shows, you name it. It was a really exciting time to be a designer at Lego Group because you had total creative freedom. You didn't need to worry about how much anything costs. You could just build whatever you wanted and launch it. So they started by launching this Lego City line, and with it came all these really complex new components, which were super expensive. Sounds fun, right? But several years later, sales were decreasing, and Lego Group was losing nearly $1 million every day in the early 2000s. So just kind of let that sink in. That is a lot of money. It's probably not the story that you would think we'd be telling about Lego Group because we see it's a very successful business today. But before they were really using research, that wasn't the case. They had all these really great core products and they just kind of let them fall by the wayside. They weren't getting any user feedback anymore. They were starting to build all these new, cool, fun things that they liked, but they didn't know if it was actually landing with the customers. And it wasn't. It was pretty simple. The kids didn't like the new products. But why? So they really didn't know why. And I think it's a story some of us will know, or people who launch products and then they get feedback later will realize they've built the wrong thing, and that's really costly. So in 2004, in comes a new CEO. He cuts costs. Designers can no longer use an unlimited amount of specialized components. They need to be cost effective. And he really starts to shift the focus back to the main product. So not working on games, television shows, all that fun digital stuff. He really makes them shift back the focus to those plastic building blocks that we all know Lego for today. And he sends out teams of researchers all over the world for 1 year to observe user behaviors to find out why, where, and how kids are playing. And he observes them with all types of toys, not just Legos, to kind of understand better their needs and why their products are starting to fail. So what they found was that they had built these really complex products and they had all these shiny things, but kids didn't really care about this futuristic product. They really wanted something familiar to them. They wanted to play with that red fire truck that they saw on the street, not something that wasn't familiar to them. The other thing that they saw was that they assumed because of the age of computer games that kids really wanted this instant gratification. They thought that kids were kind of lazy. But what they didn't realize was that kids were playing with Legos because they like this sense of kind of competition. They wanted to be able to progressively master something and show it off to their friends. So they actually dumbed it down a little bit too much, and they needed to make the product a little bit more challenging and more complex. And then they also found that their marketing wasn't working in every market. So in Japanese culture, they were marketing these toys as educational toys. It really didn't work. In Japanese culture, it needed to either be educational or a toy, couldn't be both. And they really blurred that line. And that's why they weren't allowing their kids to play with them anymore. And then the final point was that they had this user base of adult fans that they'd always kind of disregarded. They thought the adult fans were kind of weird. They didn't really want to interact with them. They didn't really want adult fans or girls even to be playing with Legos. They really just wanted to focus on like young boys playing with their products, and they were ignoring them. But what they found after speaking to them was that these adult fans had really, really great ideas, and they could inspire kids as well. They could inspire their designs, and they could drive a ton of profit from this other user base that they were ignoring for so long. So they started rebuilding their brand loyalty. They took more of a back to basics approach, and they really leaned into user feedback. And so today, user research is still a huge part of what Lego does today. They have ambassador programs, which allow fans to ask questions and provide feedback to executives directly. They have all these different forums and stuff like that, and they get some really, really great product ideas from that. The other thing is Lego Mindstorms. They had launched this new robotic block line a long time ago, and the adult fans had started kind of hacking them and doing all these really cool things. At first, Lego didn't like it and they kind of disregarded it. They didn't want them doing those things. They kind of just left it alone. But then they realized that these adult fans had actually done some really, really cool things with their products that their own like in-house development teams hadn't thought of. So instead, they decided to start co-designing with them, and they still have a bunch of adult fans now that design for them today. And the other one is just Lego ideas. So this allows fans to propose design ideas. They are then voted on by super fans. And then if they like those ideas, it progresses into an expert panel. And then if the expert panel selects that idea, the fan gets 1% of like the profits or something at the end. So it's a nice win-win, but it really is truly for like a super fan who finds a lot of joy in that as well. So everyone's gaining from this. So in summary, Lego City became a best-selling product, and in 2023, Lego reported 2% annual revenue growth, generating $9.66 billion in revenue, launching 370 new products. Now, if they hadn't done user research, this would probably be a very different story today. We probably wouldn't even be talking about it. So I think this is really, really critical, and it's a great story of why we should be doing research and why it matters to business success. Okay, so now I'm going to go into what we did in our practice, some step-by-step guides, like methodology and things, and some lessons learned. So first, when I sat down to do this, if you want to create a new research program, you really need to sit down and kind of define your goals and objectives, figure out what you're hoping to learn from this, any key questions you might have, identify your target users in your product. So maybe like Lego, you know that you already have these young boys as your user base, but maybe you have these adults and young girls that you're not looking towards. I didn't even get to the young girls part of it, but they have like NASA lines that the girls have designed and all new product lines for that. So identify your target users who you want to talk to and those products you want to focus on, and then determine which research methods you want to utilize. So this is going to depend on your budget, the context of what you're working on, and then your timeline. So the next one is create a timeline. Try to budget user research from the beginning. Don't have it be kind of an in-between thing that you're doing. And then assign resources and responsibilities. Is it one person on your team that's always doing research? Maybe have a dedicated UX researcher or team, or maybe you're going to distribute that across the team. So figure out what the strengths are of everyone and what they want to work on, and kind of assign those resources and responsibilities per study or for the entire program. And then create a process for documenting your research studies. So how you're going to be sharing those findings with stakeholders, what that's going to look like, how often you're going to be sharing. And yeah, determine a format for that, and let them know I will share like a week after my research study is done, or I'll be sharing immediately after, and what they can expect from that. So everyone's super clear, and my advice would be to be super transparent throughout and just get aligned on timeline, resourcing, and all that. So what this looked like for my team, I was very fortunate. Like I said, Pros is a very mature UX research team. So when our team integrated after the acquisition, we had some really great guidance. So I sat down with our lead researcher and we talked about the goals for the program, what we were hoping to accomplish. any existing pain points today, not having buy-in from stakeholders, for example, people not really understanding what research is, not having dedicated UX researchers on the team, maybe not understanding how much everyone knew about research, and just kind of level setting there. And then we talked about risks that could impede the research program. So that could be, again, you don't have budget for actually paying research participants. You don't necessarily need it. Maybe it could be that you don't have buy-in from a particular product manager. So maybe there's another product manager you can work with first. And once they kind of see what you're doing and understand a little bit better, you can get buy-in from other people. Or maybe it's that an executive is really concerned that you're not going to be able to launch quick enough. So we talked about all those kind of things and then started to form a strategy. So this all sounds nice and good, but at the end of the day, we always had this kind of elephant in the room. Anytime you talked about research and wanting to start it, for years and years, honestly, people just said, okay, but how can we incorporate user research without losing our ability to innovate quickly? Everyone wanted to launch quickly, work in an agile environment. They wanted to launch the product and then start to get feedback. And so we decided we needed to be scrappy. We need to start with some lightweight user research methods to get people comfortable with research, understand what we're doing here, what we're trying to accomplish, see the results of it, have data to show to them, and then you could really get started. So you might be saying that sounds nice, Brooke, but my day looks a little bit more like this. My company is looking for someone who's more of a UX unicorn. I'm doing all of these different things throughout my day, throughout my week. But my advice here would be, I think this is a classic story for a lot of people and maybe smaller companies, or if you're on a team of one. But if you're not doing research, I think it's very hard to do a lot of these other things well. So if you're just not doing research, you're doing more UI design, you're really not super confident, and it's hard to build out those other skills as well. So my advice would be just to start, try to time block your week out or your day out, reserve a few hours a week if you can for just research activities, try to put your research hat on, and try to just create a path forward. Start small, try not to get super overwhelmed. So my day looks a lot like this a lot of times too, or my teams, but it's okay. We can still do research. So our strategy going into this is we started with in-app surveys. So we decided that we were going to launch these inline surveys. So we didn't need developer resources for them. We could use a tool to just get those up quickly. We could get a ton of responses from it. We could gauge the overall user satisfaction of our products. And then we could see how it's trending over time in the future. And then we could also capture some low-hanging fruit. So this is a relatively low-effort thing we could do to get a ton of responses. Then we started doing focus groups. So if I'm being honest, I was super overwhelmed when I started creating this program for my team. I had so many assumptions and my team did of like what we needed to fix, what the main usability issues were in our products and what we wanted to do. But we didn't really know where to get started. And we didn't want to do research for something that wasn't in line with what the business wanted and what customers were actually needing from us. So me and the researcher decided that we were going to start with focus groups. So who better to know what our users need than our customer facing teams that are talking to them every day. So we did a focus group with a couple of different people in product support and customer success. We sat down for like a 2-hour session. We created a bunch of sticky notes in Miro and I asked a bunch of questions and then I let everyone silently kind of go through, answer like what products really needed user research right away, what their biggest pain points are, what they're hearing from customers most frequently. And then I did that to avoid groupthink. So everyone just kind of wrote it down separately. And then we went through and we had an open conversation about it for the second half. And then we were able to take all those things, create affinity maps, and then determine which products we really needed to do some research on first, and then which ones we wanted to approach later. And I also had them write down what customers we can start speaking to. So the next part of this was user research, obviously. So we'd identified which products really needed user research right away. And we started doing some lightweight research methods, some usability testing, some user interviews, doing lots of surveys. And we also started with internal research. So we have a lot of admin users that use our products today. So that was a really good way to gauge kind of the usability of some things. Yes, they wouldn't have all the same pain points as a customer at the end of the day, but there was still this resistance from our customer-facing teams on letting us speak to customers. There's definitely some misconceptions sometimes that people think the UX team or the researcher is going to get out there and just The customer is going to give them a wish list and they're going to say, okay, we're going to do it. That's not how we operate. So we needed to kind of show them how we run these studies, even involve some of them in the usability testing. And we were able to get buy-in that way and then start to do customer research. So that could be a nice strategy to get started. Another thing that we did whenever we were doing research is just kind of evaluate the phases that we were in, the methods we could use, and then evaluate the effort, volume, and value of certain methodologies. This was also something that we used to show to executives to get buy-in for our research program as well. To just explain to them different things. A lot of people think that research is just competitive assessments or market research, or it's a lot of like just usability testing. But we actually have so many things in our toolkits as designers and researchers. So it's really important to combine different qual and quant methodologies too, to make sure you're getting a more holistic view and feedback. So this could be a nice thing. Obviously, this will depend on context. So if you already have a prototype or you have a production UI, maybe the effort it takes you is on the low to medium end instead. But in general, you want to try to do something that's lower and medium effort and high impact. Something's like high effort and low value, that's probably something you don't want to do and you can skip. So that's a nice way to just kind of do a feature prioritization once you know what you want to test. So now I'm going to go through some research methods that you can use. This is something that we showcased to product managers, some documentation that I created for them recently. This one's pretty similar, just to kind of explain what the different methods we have are, when to use them. I got some feedback from a lot of them. They still didn't really understand everything that we do. They knew a lot now about user interviews, usability testing, competitive analysis, but what else can we start to do? How long is that going to take, and what's the effort and the involvement there? So user interviews are usually used to gather requirements about what a user flow needs to include to satisfy user needs and goals. So it's generally a one-on-one format between a user and a researcher. The users can walk you through their current workflow to observe user behavior, identify pain points, or gather user goals. This is a good tool to use if you're seeing like low engagement in your product, but you don't understand why. This would be a great thing to use. And then you can use this pre-launch or post-launch. I put the phase here because sometimes we do have to do research post-launch, and that's okay. So there's lots of different methods that you can use. Another one would be focus group, kind of like I talked about doing it with our internal teams, but you can do this with customers or end users as well. So this is for having open discussion about user goals, opportunities for improvements, and to gather ideas. Generally, this is about 6 to 9 participants for about 2-hour sessions with one moderator or researcher. This is a really good discovery tool and a really great way to gather lots of feedback really quickly. But it's really important to pair this with other methods because a lot of times users say they do something and it's quite different than what they actually do. So for this one too, just remember to actively engage those that are less vocal. A lot of people might not be as outspoken, others might. So you want to make sure that everyone's voice can be heard and they get to participate. So this can be done both pre and post-launch. And then usability testing is another great one. So this is used to test if a prototype or production UI is user-friendly or difficult to use, typically a one-on-one format between a user and a researcher. Generally, we use about 5 users at a time. Once you get above 5 users, you're tending to just kind of drop off. You've already kind of gotten what most of the usability improvements are and the issues. So no need to really do more, but you can, of course, do multiple rounds as you iterate, and you should. So this can be performed as low, mid, high fidelity prototypes before launch. Ideally, all these things we should be trying to do before launch and throughout the product development lifecycle. But not everything works that way. So if you didn't get to do testing or interviews or any type of research before launching something, I would say go back and test it with production UI. Production UI is always going to be a little bit different than a prototype too. Your prototype might not be fully interactive or clickable. Maybe you didn't have all the validations or error states as well. So it's nice to test both if you can. And this is really just used to discover findings, insights, pain points, and also can be used to collect metrics and benchmarks on user satisfaction, error and success rates and stuff like that. This can be used post-launch and pre-launch. And then A/B testing is another good one. So this is used for a comparatively test if design A or design B is better. So it can be used for prototypes before launch or to test how 2 different designs perform live. Maybe you're seeing low engagement in one project, so you can launch another version and see if that performs better. This is something I love to use if I'm sitting in like a feedback session with the product manager or other stakeholders, and they are resistant to do usability testing, but they really can't decide between two options and we're really stuck on it. That's when I always prompt them with, hey, this would be a great thing to get out and test and see how users actually react to it. And no one's ever turned me down when I've done it that way. So this can be done relatively quickly for the most part, and this is a great tool in your toolkit. It's also not limited to two designs. It could also be A/B/C testing, A/B/C/D even, but we just call it A/B testing in general. And then it's going to be done pre-launch or post-launch. Competitive intelligence. This is a great one too that a lot of people refer to as market or competitive analysis. This should always be paired with something else though. I think some stakeholders sometimes think that this is the only thing we need to do and they can kind of like check off user research on their checklist and it's done. But from what we've seen, a lot of competitors do things, they look nice, but it doesn't mean it actually works well for our users. It also doesn't mean the competitor solution is working well for them. They might have not have tested it either. So it's really important that we pair this with other methods to get a more holistic approach and understanding of if we're meeting users' needs and goals and identify any gaps in our products and gather more information. So this can be used pre-launch generally. My team always does competitive analysis anytime we have a new feature for the most part. And then card sorting. This is used to evaluate the optimal structure and navigation by asking users to organize items into categories. So this is really great for determining like structure of navigation on a menu, or if you want to figure out the information architecture of a page. This can either be closed or open. So closed means that the moderator creates the categories prior to the study, and then the participant needs to place it into those categories. Or if it's open, the moderator leaves the categories open and they will write what the categories, the names would be at the top. So this is done pre-launch. Or if something's really not working well, you can still do it post-launch, but generally pre-launch would be best to kind of figure out what the information architecture should be. And then analytics are a great tool for when you want to see where users are clicking or what pages are visiting on a website or product. So you can determine search terms, usage, user interactions to identify issues and behaviors. Or you can see how many users clicked on a certain item, like a button, or scroll down to a certain part of the page. So this is a really good indicator of true user behavior because it's not moderated by a user researcher. You're seeing what they're actually doing. And this can be done post-launch, and it's relatively low effort once you've implemented it. Surveys are used to quickly gather quantitative data about user needs, goals, and satisfaction. This is used to answer key questions and quickly capture low-hanging fruit from a large amount of users. You can also track overall user satisfaction over time with your products, see if it's meeting their needs, how the ease of use is, if they think it's visually appealing, things like that. And then start to determine product improvement needs based on that. This is done pre-launch and post-launch. We do see it sometimes though that sometimes you have like lower touch points because people get kind of tired of surveys. So it's nice to do other methods as with everything else. So how to start incorporating this into your process. So allocate a dedicated user researcher or designer, or in my team's case, we distribute across the team. I generally lead and facilitate user recruitment. I figure out what studies we're going to do, timelines, resourcing, and stuff like that. But we all kind of share the burden of like note-taking and facilitating and moderating interview sessions and testing and creating prototypes and all that fun stuff. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, that can be a nice way to do it. And then build user research into your project timelines or sprints. When you're first getting started creating research program, I think it can be very overwhelming, and people kind of have a tendency to do these kind of like in-between research studies instead of thinking about it from the beginning. And then you might feel like you're always in a rush or behind and you're having to create these prototypes in like 2 days. So ideally, you want to start discussing user research before project kickoff, but at the very least, do it then. Talk about what methods you're going to use, be realistic about expectations, and be very transparent to everyone how long it should take you, how long it should take before you have your design recommendations and your next iterations after you do any type of research. And if you can, really try to plan this like a year out in advance, or at least every quarter, plan what your research is going to be. Of course, this can change as priorities shift, but it's nice to think about it and start getting everyone involved in the beginning. And then utilize lightweight research methods. So this is really nice. Again, as I said, we did a lot of usability testing, user interview surveys, not quite as much like contextual interviews and inquiry and things like that. That would take much longer in the beginning. So we're moving towards that now, but in the beginning, just find a couple of methods that work for you and things that are going to work for your timelines and everyone's agreed upon. So my advice really would be to start small, aim big, choose research methodologies that best suit your project needs, and then target a few projects or features that will have a large impact. So if you're adding just like a button to a screen or adding a small thing to a feature, you maybe don't need to do a full user research study. You might not have resources or time allocated to do it for every single feature, and that's okay. So try to think about things you can do post-launch to production, usability testing if you didn't get to test it before launch. And then use the value versus effort matrix for prioritization. So like I said, if something is going to be super high effort and low impact, that's probably not something we need to worry about and focus on. And then make sure that whatever research you're doing is in line with the business goals and what we're working on and the product vision as well. So my other advice here would be to really standardize your process. So create templates to kind of speed up your workflow and get everyone aligned on what's expected of them if they're involved in user research. So when we first started at MIT, we didn't have any sort of templates for this, and it was pretty overwhelming anytime you had to draft new like user interview questions or do a usability test. So I started to create templates for us, so we were all aligned on what note-taking would look like. And now we have something, so at the top, it's generally, we have context, so everyone kind of knows why we're doing the research, what we're hoping to achieve, any links to relevant documentation, if we already have Figma mockups, if there's already production UI, if we have feature documentation from a product manager. If there's other research done, you could link that there, so we're really organized. And then we'll write down our objectives and our goals, so what we're trying to solve, key questions that any of the stakeholders might have, who the participants are, any dates for when we've scheduled testing with them, and then we'll have recruitment emails there so we can like copy and paste those things very quickly. Interview introductions. So we have a draft for what it's going to look like whenever we're speaking to the customer, asking for permission for things like recording and stuff like that that you don't want to forget about, right? So those things can make it a lot easier. And then kind of like standard interview questions you might have around overall user satisfaction, must-have, nice-to-haves, maybe at the end that people can kind of reuse every now and then. And then we have a note-taking template. In the beginning, when we were doing user interviews and usability testing, it wasn't clear to anyone like what was expected of them as a note taker, and everyone on the team was doing it. So we were spending a lot of time trying to clean up the notes afterwards, and it was a huge waste of time. So it's really nice to have a template so everyone's aware what's expected of them. They can start taking the notes during the interview in that way too. And then there's less cleanup later. So we have the participants, the dates and recordings link there as well, if we got permission to record it. And that's been really helpful. And this is also super important for sharing with stakeholders. So that's my next point. Share as much as possible your research findings, your design suggestions, and the impact of your program to stakeholders. So in the past year, as we got started with our program, we were regularly conducting every couple of months these sessions, walking through case studies, our research findings, what we were doing, where the program was headed, to executives that maybe didn't have full buy-in yet on research. And this was really, really helpful to get them on board and make them feel like they were part of the collective success of the research program. So this is great. We also did like end of the year recaps on all of the research that we did too. And by the end, we didn't have anyone that felt like research was slowing them down anymore. And that was like our main pain point in the beginning. And we also had some really positive things to say from other people in the company, customer success team members and stuff like that we could like add in these presentations and get everyone on board. So the other thing here is, as you're sharing, anytime we take those like note-taking templates, anytime we do a research study, we always include things like KPIs. So if we were measuring error, success, task rates, overall user satisfaction scores, I would include that there. Also key findings and takeaways. So I try to envision anytime we're sharing this, that in our Confluence page, an executive would go into this. What are like the high level findings and an executive summary essentially of the research study. So if we had any aha moments, that would go in the key findings. If we were measuring one versus the other, what if like 8 people out of 10 preferred option A over B or something like that for A/B testing, that would go there. And then decisions needed. This one's super critical. Your product managers and your developers don't really have time to sift through all your research studies and go through all your recordings. So here is where we put makes decisions, and we decide if we're going to do things now, do it later, don't do it at all. So we'll have feedback and questions here and who's responsible for things. And we'll get those drilled out as we do the design suggestions in that meeting. So I think it's really, really critical that we try to think of research from a business lens as well. So some things we don't want to do because just one user asked for it. And we want to make sure it's in line with the product vision and it's actually going to generate revenue for the company as well. So if I had to summarize all of this today, you really can't do it alone. Make others part of the collective success of your program. So executives really provide support and resources. They're providing budget for these things as well. So it's super, super critical that you get them involved. Product managers are going to provide feedback on the technical feasibility for improvements, incorporate your recommendations into the product vision. Your developers are going to include usability improvements into development. The researchers, if you have one, are going to conduct user research studies, analyze data, and then UX designers are going to incorporate those findings into design solutions. Of course, there's many other people here, like customer success, product support are also huge collaborators and people that can really help champion your user research program and help with recruitment and stuff like that. So bring as many people into this as possible, and then you eventually will get buy-in from all these people here. So to that point, foster collaboration between teams, set expectations for when you're going to be sharing findings, how many research studies you're going to be doing, when, how long it's going to take you. If you get behind schedule, maybe you're having a really hard time recruiting users, make sure you're transparent and you're checking in with your stakeholders all the time to make sure they're still aligned, decide if you actually need to hold off, if you need to switch to another research method, or if you still have time to do it. What you don't want to do is create a research program and start doing all this amazing research, and then you start to get this rep of research is taking forever and it's like drawing things out. So just be upfront and clear about that. Always a lot more time than you need to. And then focus on problems. Don't jump to just creating solutions. So I think this one is hard because a lot of times we hear feedback from users or product managers hear it, but we really don't understand the why behind it. So always try to get back to the why. That's why we should speak to multiple users to really understand better. And then communicate those findings regularly to stakeholders. So whether that looks like sending out emails or Confluence documentation of your findings or recordings of your sessions, or maybe it's more of a presentation format. Figure out what works best for your organization and their communication style, but communicate as regularly as possible. And then prioritize user needs and feedback alongside business needs. So like I said before, make sure everyone's aligned and we're not doing something just based on the feedback of one user, and that it actually makes sense for the product long-term. So measuring success, make sure you include KPIs to evaluate the success of your product or feature. So task success, error rates, user satisfaction scores, time spent on tasks. You can also evaluate the overall user satisfaction of your research program with things like satisfaction scores over time, and continue to evaluate your research program or find as needed over time. So we might have been doing more like internal user studies in the beginning and doing more lightweight methods, but now that we have some more resources and more buy-in, we should be able to move on to other methods too, and some longer research studies. So lessons learned, don't assume that cross-functional teams understand the importance of user research or your process. I think in the beginning, a lot of people have this kind of misconception that like, oh, my company doesn't do research because they don't like it or they don't want to do it, they don't value it. And I think it's easy to kind of get in your head if you hear no so many times. But what we found is actually everyone's super on board with research now that they understand what it is. You just really need to communicate the importance of it, show case studies, show the value of what it is, and don't assume that people know what it is. So ask them, have you worked with UX designers or UX researchers before? What kind of methods have you used? How do you feel about user research? And then if they don't know, then say, do you mind like if I explain a little bit, and just kind of explain more about your methods. So the other part is teach others about different tools in your toolkit, when to use them and why. And this is an ongoing thing. They might be super comfortable now in our organization with user interviews, usability testing, A/B testing, but don't really understand card sorting or contextual inquiry or stuff like that yet. So continue to talk about it, continue to show the value of research. So within the first 6 months of our research program, we exceeded our research study goal by 200%. In the beginning, we set out to do 3 user research studies at the beginning. We ended up doing over 10, which would have felt super overwhelming if we had started by saying we needed to do 10. So that would be my advice. Like once people got on board and people started seeing us do research, everyone wanted to do research for all of the products. We ended up doing a ton of research last year. So start small, aim big, like I said, and you too could be in this position next year where you're doing tons of research. All right, so thank you guys. Now I'm going to open up to questions and answers.
Awesome, Brooke. Thank you so very much. That was a whole bunch that you went through real quickly. I don't know if anyone else has any questions first, but I can go ahead and open it up. You mentioned in the beginning about setting realistic expectations for timelines. And one of the biggest things that I always find when we're, trying to set expectations for timelines is that, there is kind of that recruitment sinkhole where you're just waiting on email responses and trying to get people on books before you can even start to gather data to, start to anticipate when you might even actually be able to report out. How do you set that expectation realistically for stakeholders when you're explaining what your timeline is, and how do you kind of navigate that situation as they're like, oh, well, it's been a week and I've only gotten 2 people on the books?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, it varies, right? So now what I've started to do is I've started trying to plan out my research a lot further because I have been in that same situation as you. So now we're in Q2, we started planning user interviews with and reaching out to our customers before Q3 started, knowing that we want to do that first week or 2 of Q3, we want to start doing the interviews. So I would say if you can, try to start planning out like a couple of weeks ahead. Maybe they're still ideating. You guys can at least start to kind of work things out. I mean, in this case, we're still forming our user interview questions and we have it in like 2 weeks. But you might have to be a little bit uncomfortable in that and just kind of be realistic about how long it's going to take. The other thing I would say is, hey, I'm trying to reach out, but so-and-so is like super busy. So I might need a month of recruitment and then maybe there's another product you can work on and kind of flip things if it's taking a long time to get research. Unfortunately, sometimes I've been in a situation too where we need to like not research and then do it after the fact because we couldn't recruit enough people. So that doesn't mean I didn't do research at all, but maybe I got 3 participants instead, and then we came back to it after we did some iteration. I got the next 2 that I wanted to have my like 5 total. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I guess kind of while I have the floor still a little bit, what's your biggest tip to get buy-in from stakeholders who, don't really understand the importance of UXR, especially when you're just starting up and you don't really have a whole lot of representative things that you can show that, like this is why UXR is good.
Yeah, so I think for us, like the biggest thing was once we started doing those focus groups, like surveys are cool and everything, you get a lot of data, but I think like getting everyone in there and feeling like, wow, this UX team like really wants to help us and really wants to help our customers and they're listening to us and they have solutions and stuff, I think is so amazing to get buy-in. And then those customer success people are the people that were like helping us recruit users and telling the executives how amazing our research program was and how like the customers appreciate it so much and how we did XYZ. So I'd say if you can start with like kind of creating a allyship with the customer facing teams, that would be really awesome. I don't know if you have that in your, do you have that opportunity?
Not quite so much.
Okay. So if not, I would say try to do things like surveys then. Can you hear me? Sorry.
I'm still here. Yes, my camera died. I apologize.
No, you're fine. So yeah, then I would probably say go back to things like surveys that you can get really quickly. Sometimes I've had people say, hey, we don't really have time to do usability testing. We don't need to do it. This problem you're telling me there is doesn't actually exist. And so I'll do a survey and I'll show them the results. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, actually, you were right. We can then do some testing. So I would say choose some quick things like that. And maybe someone didn't technically give you permission to do it, but there's some other ways you can get around it, right? So things like that could be doing guerrilla testing. You grab an internal team member, you have them test your UI, and you see some like real key usability issues. And then you can pop that in a presentation or share the results with an executive, and they can't really argue with that once they see the data.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions they want to ask?
I'm curious how you find it to try to propose site visits or like contextual inquiry, field work, whatever you want to call it, these days. Is this something that you are ever able to convince stakeholders of lately?
Yeah. So my immediate team and my reports haven't really done a ton right now, but our broader team does a lot of it. I think a lot of times they are doing some remote ones, but we are still doing site visits. We do a lot of like day on the life sessions where we go in, we sit, we watch them a day or two. But yeah, I think we have to get a little bit creative with the remote stuff now in this world. But the rest of my team is doing a ton of it. So yes. Are you having a hard time with that right now, Liz?
I'm always interested, as somebody whose primary research method is field work, to see what I guess like the changing attitude toward going on site visits is. I feel like right now it's for at least for the last year, not even during the pandemic. That's a whole different story. But in the past year or so, it's felt like something that businesses wanted to invest less time and resources in, to actually fly people somewhere. And I'd say even like back in 2018, 2019, that was still really happening a lot. Most UX researchers I knew were flying all over the place. So I'm curious, like if it's picking back up or whether it's still in a bit of a lull.
Yeah, I mean, I know at pros we're doing a lot of it still. I think it did fall off for a little bit and now we're back doing a ton. I think pros is very lucky though, in that we're a very research driven company, so we don't really have to push for that quite as much. Maybe you could try, do you guys do like remote sessions instead? I know that can be a little bit awkward if you're trying to watch someone for a long time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get to do whatever I want, but still, like, yeah, I mean, I know these days I hear less and less about it, about field work from folks. So I'm constantly trying to, if I get the chance to talk to people who are in charge of this kind of decision making, I always push for it.
Yeah, no, it's super important. Anyone else?
I can field another just out of curiosity question.
Yeah.
Um, how are y'all feeling about some of the research tools that are coming out in the market right now? You look at user testing, Discuss.io, Dscal, Dovetail. Are y'all kind of exploring these, and how have you seen those maybe change them if you are kind of looking at them, change the way that you're doing things?
Yeah, we're not using any of those right now. We did have someone walk us through Dovetail the other day, and I thought it was super fascinating. Like the ability to just go through and tag all of your recordings and have timestamps of everything is amazing. I mean, the amount of times I have to like write that in Confluence and then try to find it later is just so difficult. I don't know about you guys, but I find that to be a really cool space. And I don't know if we're going to explore it yet, but yeah, we'll see.
Awesome. I was just curious. We're kind of looking at those two. We have a question in the chat. What collaboration methods do you recommend the most to help keep your team connected and informed?
In general, or is it like research oriented? Or is it informing my team on what research we're doing?
I suppose we could do both.
Okay, cool. That works too. Let's see. Both. Okay, cool. Yeah, so collaboration, when it comes to like our research studies, I think both earlier, most of my team are like individual contributors. So for the most part, they're kind of in these like design solution sessions, giving recommendations. They're like more one-on-one with the product manager, giving the feedback. And I think that's really critical because they're kind of figuring out how to prioritize things. But when it comes to the actual like stakeholder and executive reviews that I'm doing with people, I don't usually invite the rest of my team to those. Those are generally like other managers and people that are leading teams where I just kind of have open discussions about things, the product vision, what we're doing with things. And I do those every couple of months to just kind of get us aligned on like the pain points that we're hearing from customers, what's happening, what we want to do about it, what direction we want to go in, if some of these pain points are actually things we want to solve, if it's in line with the product vision that we're working on or not. And those kind of sessions I won't invite them to, but I will always like share back the results of that, what we talked about, gather their feedback on that. And then so that's more like research-based, collaboration methods for my team. We do a lot of like design squawks on our team. So a lot of design critique, sorry, I shouldn't call it squawk. It's an acronym internally. So we do a lot of like design critique sessions to get feedback so the team can collaborate together. A lot of designers on our team work on like just one product. Some will work on multiple, but some are more to break down these silos. We like to have these sessions so everyone can see what all the different products are, what everyone's working on. We can get more feedback from other designers and kind of break down those silos. So they do those like weekly. We also have design learning sessions where we collaborate on Figma UI, new things that are coming out, tips and tricks. We go through like variable prototyping and how people are using it in their workflows, new things that came out, maybe a problem people are trying to solve. We'll watch like tutorials and articles and stuff like that. Because I feel like every designer, no matter what level you're in, is always looking for continued learning, and it's hard to really bake that into your projects and set aside time. You might block your calendar that day, but then you're like, oh, I have this project to work on, let me delete it, or let me, I'm just heads down in that. So we found that's a really nice time because it's like dedicated time where we just talk about design learning, what people are interested in, what's happening in the industry and trends and stuff. And then other things we do is just like in our individual teams, we have weekly meetings where we just talk about projects people are working on, maybe any blockers they're having, general organizational things, studies we're working on. If I'm doing like research methods or I have these presentations with executives, I talk about findings from that. So yeah, we're like a totally remote team. So we have people all over the world, really, I should say. So it's pretty nice to have that opportunity to connect. And then our broader team, we have like bi-weekly meetings where we just talk about design topics, things going on in the organization, and yeah, just lots of things. What else? So frequent touch points, I would say.
We have another one from the chat.
Yeah.
Kenza, it says that you touched on getting buy-in from stakeholders for research. That's the number one issue that they're facing in an agency setting. Do you have anything other than what you've already mentioned that works well to get that buy-in?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel I haven't worked in an agency, but I feel like when people don't really understand the value of UX, and what I hear from people that work at agencies a lot of it tends to be kind of graphic design and stuff like that. So when I'm operating with people that are really giving a lot of feedback, or my team is on just visual design, I try to ask them like, where's that feedback coming from? If they want the text bigger, why do they want it bigger? Like, what's the reasoning behind that? If they're like really striving towards one solution, but I think one is much better, I will ask them to do some sort of testing. And this is where, like I said to Zach, I would do some guerrilla testing. I would just like show it to someone else in my organization. Hopefully someone's not a UXer because they're going to be a little bit biased. But I'd show it to a couple of people. I would get some feedback. I would write it down on like a sticky note, a Figma, or maybe I would maybe even invite this person if I can to the session to kind of see the feedback live. And then they'll start to see the value of research and like what we're actually doing. We're not just sitting there like pushing pixels all day. And we need to have like database things. The other thing I would do is just go back to your best practices. I'll send like articles to people or like quotes. If there's something someone's trying to force me to use some text that isn't legible, I'll send them like articles about why it's not accessible and things like that. So you need to get a little creative, but try to, yeah, I would say like guerrilla testing is really probably your best find. So I'm just trying to look at this. Yeah. And then once you start to do that, it's to share it back with them, right? Like I thought it was really, in the beginning, we were like, I don't know if we need to keep doing all these presentations for executives, but it actually was the most important thing for our program because they see the UX team is out doing this. At Pros, we also have like monthly or bi-monthly now UX showcases where we can show the entire organization what we've been working on. It's very research-based. And so we show them, this is what we had before. This is what it looks like now that we have UX, and we bring product managers in as well to those presentations, and people can really see like that we're collaborating with them, the impact of it, and what it's doing for the business as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Kansas says thank you in the chat too. Any other questions from anyone? Feel free to put them in the chat, or you can come off mute.
I guess I have one more. I'm curious if you've seen and in what ways you've seen so far AI changing your workflow. And I ask this because this is like the topic of like all the blog entries, all the like LinkedIn posts. And so like, have you seen it change your work in any way yet?
Liz, I was just gonna ask the same as like a roundtable if no one asked it. It's the hot topic. I think so. I think we're trying to figure out like what works best for us right now. But I think like an obvious way right now is obviously copywriting. So it's been very or like note taking. So I find it can be pretty helpful if I wanted to summarize my notes for me, change the tone of like an interview question or something to reduce the bias and make it more neutral. It doesn't always work the best. It'll like change the to like by sometimes when I ask it to be neutral. So I feel like it still has a long way to go, but I think we definitely see it as just a way to increase efficiencies for all of us. So mainly like notes, a lot of summarizing too. We do a ton of workshops on our team together. So maybe we'll be talking about like UX and PM collaboration or other teams and like different methods people are using for designing and like what tools they like. And so we'll like be creating a Miro board and then we go in and we or Fig Jam even, and we can go in and have the AI summarize for us, like the sentiments, what the key problems are and stuff like that. So we found it really useful in like collaborating team meetings for things like that, but it's not always the most accurate. So you do need to go and still tweak it. And yeah, I do like it for note taking to kind of summarize my key takeaways sometimes, as long as I don't have anything confidential or proprietary in there. But that can be helpful too. But again, it's not really great at suggesting like design recommendations or anything at this point. I am curious to see where it goes. And we were watching the config conference. I don't know if any of you guys tuned in between today and yesterday, but they announced like a new AI for like creating designs. And a lot of people in the comments were really worried that AI is here to like steal your job and there's not going to be any designers anymore. But then someone gave a talk later. He was a copywriter and he was showing how he was using it to create like mind maps or like rename colors for him. And I thought that was pretty cool. It was a little bit off because I think it wrote like oysters, blueberry or something weird like that. That didn't make sense and a human would know. So you still need to validate it, but it was a way to like quickly generate some copy and ideas and stuff like that. So for like creating headers or titles, if I had like certain subcategories, I found it to be useful for stuff like that too. But his point was it's not here to steal your job, it's here to help you do your job. But if you don't know how to use AI, then you probably will lose your job to someone that doesn't know how to use it, right? So I think that's important to think about. I'm curious how you guys are using it in your workflows and what you guys think about
Yeah,
all
that's
this.
like the common phrase, right? You know, AI is not here to take your job, but if you don't learn how to use it, someone will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
thank you. My experience has been, it sounds like quite a bit like yours in terms of like what it's good for at the moment. Yeah. And also it generates really terrible sources for things. So if you're ever looking for an article, half the time it's a hallucination. And so you're like, okay, now I have to find a really actually useful article.
Yes, 100%. I would say even when I was giving this presentation, I was trying to look for some companies that were using, that were really research driven and had like changed around their business from it. And I found the example of Lego. And before I probably would have typed in a Google search and just, found something else and it wouldn't have been the top result. So this was like an interesting story I hadn't heard before. So that I found in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome.
yeah. What kind of like tools are you guys using for AI?
I'm not allowed to use it for
Yeah.
my actual job yet. They haven't given it the quality
It can
protocol
be
clearance yet.
personal. Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I just kind of play around with Chat GPT, OpenAI a little bit, mess around with Midjourney some, but
Yeah.
that's in the very limited amount of personal time that I have. I try to get away from this computer very, very far.
Yeah. Someone says perplexity is a good one too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have tried it to like for various tasks that like writing, it's good for documentation, for things like the kind of technical writing that is just a slog. So if I need to write, for example, like a confidentiality statement, or I need to write like some sort of any kind of research document where I'm like getting consent from people to interview or study or record, or that kind of thing can be fairly systematized at this point. And like honestly, that's the kind of writing that AI can piece together pretty well without making a mess of it. Formatting things, it's good. Like I think, yeah, I mean, it's like it's a good jumping off point for a lot of UX tasks, but I feel like you still have to go in and fix it afterwards. Like if you ask it to write a usability test like for X or Y, it's not going to do a good job yet. I mean, it's not going to have the cleverness of a human UX researcher who's able to go, okay, this is like really the kinds of things we need to get at with this test. Like we need to highlight this and this and that. Like it's a blunt tool still in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to keep up with. I'm not on the design side, so like I think the design folks have seen some interesting developments in like in the way it partners with their work in ways that I'm not really seeing it on the research side.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Makes sense.
Really good at giving overviews of like if you're trying to present out, like someone's like, okay, show me what kind of research methods you have. And you're like, okay, well, give me a brief summary of usability testing, A/B testing, card sorting. It'll give you short little 4 sentence ones. And if you want a couple of use cases, it'll list them out pretty quickly. And for the most part, it's relatively accurate.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
still got a fact check.
Yeah, it is good for like if I encounter a research method I haven't heard of before and it's not new, like it's something that's been around for a while. Like I've came across one that's used in sociology, but not in anthropology just this week. And I asked GPT about it and it gave me a pretty good explanation actually. Because it's a method that's been used for qualitative data analysis for like decades. So it didn't have to work that hard. It also summarizes lengthy research articles very, very nicely. If you upload the PDF, don't like try to paste it in. I don't know why. It seems to make a difference, but it does.
Really interesting. Good. I haven't heard of view.com. Anyone here?
Yes, but
Gonna have to look it up after.
yeah, I'm going to it right now because now I'm like, what do I? Oh yeah. That's the one that there's a smartphone app for that one, right? I think I have that installed.
No.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had that bookmarked forever and I haven't used it because I pay for subscriptions on like 4 of the other tools. And so I'm like, at this point, I'm tapped out.
Once you get used to one tool,
Yeah.
Any more AI, I'm gonna have to cancel my Netflix.
yeah, they lock you in.
Yeah, Microsoft's doing some interesting things with Copilot. I don't have access to those with our Microsoft license at UH, but they came and talked to us like a year ago. And yeah, they're like, if you have the full capacity of Copilot, it seems pretty cool. Like I love the idea of being able to take notes in Teams meetings. Right now I can only do that in Zoom.
Yeah. The note summaries can be interesting. Sometimes it's a little, I find with all these tools and they're kind of summarizing who's speaking, I can get a little bit confused. But in general, it gets most of the gist. So
Sometimes it doesn't make them quite so summaries. I have the phone with AI on it, and I try to use it to summarize a meeting and give me like a 33-page document. I was like, it's going to take me longer to read this than the meeting was.
Yeah, not a summary.
Or it's like summarized my notes and there's like 3 items and it's like, okay, well, that's not quite enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
Well, awesome.
Try it though. I have view.com open. Okay, so yeah, thank you for reminding me, Ricky, that I should actually stop just bookmarking it and not using it and actually give it a try.
So let's check it out after. Right. Any other questions? Anyone?
Rinky says happy to help. No other questions for anyone in the audience?
Remember, you guys, we're protecting you from the debates, so last chance.
Awesome. Well, if no one else has any questions, I want to give a huge shout out to you, Brooke. Thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing this talk with us. Yeah, no, does anyone know how to do the fancy Zoom stuff? You know, you do like the thumbs up. Does that like?
Sometimes.
There we go.
Well, someone's got it.
That's very seasonally apt too, because it's
Yeah, 2
4th of
thumbs up will
July.
do it. Like, and but you have to hold it in like a weird way. Yeah. If it's just me, I'm gonna
I
feel
don't
so
know.
magic.
I don't think it's you, and it's got to be you.
I love that for me. That's
Well, huge shout out to you, Brooke. Thank you so very much. A reminder to everyone watching that this will be posted on the YouTube channel, along with a link to get to Brooke's slides if you want to look at any of that. We should hopefully have that up. It shouldn't take us too long, within a week for sure.
Awesome. Okay.
Was
Someone said
fun.
you need to remove the blur background to get your animation, Zach.
Oh, is that it? Well, my office is still very packed up.
We're not going to do that live.
There's boxes back there still.
You
No,
owe
I
it to yourself though to log into like an empty meeting and just try it at some point.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. Also, if you're looking for it, we should have an announcement on our July event relatively soon. It will likely be towards the end of July since we're getting pretty close to the beginning. So it'll probably be in the same kind of second to last week of July. So be on the lookout for that announcement. And other than that, y'all have a great rest of your night. Thank you once again, Brooke. We'll try to shoot you a care package or something here soon. Maybe a Starbucks gift card or something.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Good to know. Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great night.
You too. Bye.